So another Patreon Q&A, a bit different today. You see more than just my hands. I'm sorry for the mess back there, but that's real life for you. I want to say hi to Letty Gotchberg, Sei Gesund, Bubale. And let's move to the challenge, the monthly challenge, the Patreon, Discord, Patreon, whatever you want to call it, monthly challenge. Last time we had sending all of your voices, never mind VCV or hardware, through 100% wet reverb, which was really fun. I will put all of the submissions in the end of this video. This month, we have also something... Sorry, something really nice. It's funny because it's a funny challenge. Creating a drum beat, a drum groove. I hope you can also participate because it's really cool. Only from samples from your kitchen. Salt shakers, pans, pots, whatever, wooden spoons, sample them, create a drum beat, a drum beat or a drum groove. It's a funny one, and yeah, this will be, all of the other details will be on the Patreon Discord channel, so have fun. Let's already move to the first question. I have it here. Let's see, from Joseph Minadeo. What would be a good order to explore resources, YouTube's manuals, etc., to try to learn VCV from absolute scratch? And hoping to get to eventual intermediate level. So I have a list here that I have prepared. Now VCV is a bit difficult, just VCV, because there is not so much information or so many videos or so many articles about VCV Rack. There is about modular synthesis, there is about eurorack, so this is probably the better direction. For example, the first thing I would do, I will go to Learning Modular. It's a YouTube channel and it's a website also from Chris Meyer where you can learn everything about eurorack. Now VCV Rack is a eurorack emulation, so I would start with eurorack. Again, Chris Meyer, Learning Modular, he has videos, articles, all sorts of stuff that you can learn from. And he has also a course, it's a paid course, it's mostly about eurorack, but it has also a lot of information that can help you with VCV Rack. So I will start there. Then another YouTuber or another YouTube channel is DivKid, of course, we all know DivKid. If you want tutorials or videos about a specific module or techniques, I would pick randomly just a video from the last year or 2 years or so, something like this. And I would watch it even if I don't even if we don't have the module in VCV Rack or we don't have the module in hardware, I would just go and watch it because there are always interesting tips and techniques and things that can spark ideas in your head that you can try in VCV Rack and explore. Another website I would recommend checking out is the Synth Secrets from Sound on Sound. It's like an article of, I think, 80 different examples. I don't know, many different examples of different patching and synthesis techniques that you can explore and learn from. Another one is a book. This is Patch and Tweak. Now, I know it's not a cheap book. It costs quite a lot. It's a big book. It's beautiful. And again, it's mostly about eurorack. First of all, it can help you because, again, VCV Rack is an emulation of eurorack, but there are also 50 patches from the book that are examples in the book that are built in VCV Rack that you can download for free and you can explore in VCV Rack. So when you get the book, you can look at the patches, at different examples there, and then download the patches for VCV Rack and explore them further in VCV Rack. So this is also a really good resource. Another one, what you mentioned, is manuals. I would go always and look at the manual. In VCV Rack, it's a bit of a problem because there are not always manuals. But when there are, for example, geodesics, DHE modules, beautiful manuals with lots of ideas that can, again, not only tell you about the specific module, but also different techniques or things you can try with other modules as well and learn while doing so. Another place you can learn from is patch storage, where most of the VCV patches are uploaded there. There is a whole community there of people who are uploading patches. I also upload some of the patches from the videos there. On patch storage, you can look for tags like beginner, for example. and look for patches that are appropriate more for beginners or for different modules or for different techniques, and download the patches and explore them. There is an issue here because sometimes you will not have the modules, sometimes there are paid modules, also free modules, sometimes you will not have them and you will have to install more modules. This is not something I recommend for beginners. If you are a beginner to VCV Rack, don't download everything, even if it's free. I know it's hard. Don't download all of the different modules. It will just confuse you. So this is a bit of a trick. It's tricky with patch storage because sometimes you will have to download more modules. But when you feel comfortable with the VCV Rack, when you feel ready, download some of the patches in patch storage and explore them. This is the best way, I think, exploring other people's patches. When they are small, not such huge patches, it can be a bit intimidating. Yeah, so this is how I would start. I would start with, and of course, it's all about practicing also. So if you see something in a video, don't try it once, try it twice, 3 times, 4 times. Dedicate a whole week for one building block, for one technique, for one aspect. If it's VCAs, for example, try and explore VCAs for a whole week. There is no way around it. No one will tell you exactly what it will do, what it can do for you. You will have to go and explore. Okay, so this was the first question. Okay, the next question is from Dan MCA. I think for me, the question is how do experienced VCV and hardware users inject freshness into the techniques in order to build patches that surprise them? That's a nice one. Like an instrument player, we practice the techniques. In a musical instrument, we make them muscle memory. In modular, I think we make the brain muscle brain muscle memory. But because we are building up the instrument as new so often, totally true. I think there might be some good ways that people have adopted to trick their muscles into building a new instrument, or to set out and make the landscape different so that their experienced muscles have to learn a new landscape. This is a really nice question. None of these are the real secret sauce. All of that is in our heads and the bits that prefer some sounds to another, but I think they must be a part of the daily approach to the instrument. Really nice, Dan. So first of all, how to inject freshness? I think the best solution is to buy more and new gear. No, but seriously, if you think, listen, if you have your instrument, I mean, in VCV it's a bit different. Let's talk hardware for a second. If you think that you have your instrument for a long time, that you explored many things, that you hit sort of a brick wall, let's say, I think buying something new, if you can afford it, if you have the space, if it's not too early, if you don't just jump to seek for the next new thing, I think getting something new can really, as you say, as you mentioned, inject freshness to your instrument. In a sort of a way, because this also you mentioned, it's always we make the instrument as new, which is so true because you add one module and the instrument is totally different thing altogether. That's the beauty of modular, I think. So first of all, if you think that you reach a sort of a brick wall with your modular, get something new, maybe exchange a module with a friend, maybe exchange it just like this with someone you don't know. See, this is the first thing. I know it's not common to say buy more stuff, but I say just after you reach the point where you say, okay, I know what's going on and I need something new. Buy something small, again, if you have the space and if you can afford it. What else you can do is change the position of the modules. Again, in VCV, it's a bit different because it's always different because you don't have your instrument. There's a difference between using VCV Rack and hardware, but in hardware, if you have your modular, change the place of the modules. Just by that, I remember when I used to play piano, I used to practice on my piano at home. And then when I went to a friend, for example, who had also a piano, it was like a new instrument for me because it looked different. The settings was different. I couldn't play like I play at home because everything was different. things that I didn't notice in my room because my brain was already used to it. I had to pick up in a different room on a different piano that looked and felt also different. So just by changing the position of the modules, where they are, this can also inject some freshness and can also be quite inspiring sometimes. Now, also in VCV Rack, something that you also mentioned, this is practicing with modular. I think the best way is to dedicate special times for practicing. That you will sit down and you say, now this is my practice time. I'm not making music. I'm not expecting to make anything spectacular. I'm not going to record a video of it. I'm not even going to record it. All I'm doing is just I'm going to practice. Because when you have specific time for practicing, then when you reach the point when you want to make music, you don't have to think so much about the how, but more about the what. Because the how you made already by practicing. You have a specific sound in your head, you know how to get it. All you have to think now when you are making music is what you want to add, the textures, the sounds. So I think also dedicating specific times for practicing can also help you with making fresh or fresher music. Another thing that can help you, this is also something I like doing, is looking at manuals. So for example, you sit down and you say, okay, I don't know what to do anymore. I tried everything. Take the manual, sit with the manual, go feature by feature, give it a try. Maybe there is something you didn't try and you say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know I can do this. Now I have a whole new idea in my head. Because the manuals, even though they are for specific modules, I spoke about this before in the first question, even though the manuals are for a specific module, you can always apply some of the techniques, some of the things that are written in the manual to other modules as well, which might again inspire you. All of a sudden you read a manual for one delay, but you say, wait a minute, if I can do it with this delay, can I not do it with the other delay? Or with a reverb, or with a different voice, or with a VCA. So I think manuals can also really help you stay fresh. I know sometimes it's boring because you have to sit down and read, but I really like it. Again, I dedicate time with the manual. I sit with the manual with one module and I explore it. This is how I practice. I explore the modules. I think practicing with modular, it will sound a bit vain, but I think practicing with the modular rather than the piano, for example, is more here in the brain, is more intellectual, let's say, and less with the muscles. You also mentioned it. With the piano, I know there's a story about, I was not there, so I don't know if it's true, but about Franz Liszt, famous composer, that he used to practice the piano while reading the newspaper. So he was reading the newspaper and his fingers were practicing because he had to practice the muscles. With modular, I think, with electronic music, with synthesis, it's a bit different because it's more in the head. You cannot practice the muscles of turning knobs and plugging in and out cables. So this is more of learning your modules. Again, sit down with the manual, pick a module, take the manual, and see maybe something will inspire you. Now about building a new instrument in VCV Rack. So VCV Rack is different in the way how you approach it, I think. So in modular, when you have hardware, you don't have, this is how it is for me and for other friends that I spoke with about this. You don't come with the modular with an idea and you pick the modules like you do in VCV Rack. In VCV Rack, you have the idea and you pick the modules that will make this idea happen. In hardware, it's a bit different because it's mostly the modules themselves that gives you the idea of what you want to go and how you can go with it. You have this limitation of this is what I have and this is what the modules can give me. And this is again why I go back to manuals, because manuals can show you, wait a minute, there is something I didn't try. I can try it and all of a sudden get inspired by it. And before you know it, you have a whole patch going, something you didn't try before. So yeah, in VCV Rack, I think it's a bit different because VCV Rack is always new, always, unless you have a template, which can help, but I don't think it's something that that is right to do in VCV Rack. I think if you have, I tried it a few times to have like a fixed track in VCV Rack, but I think that's not the point of VCV. That's not how you should approach VCV Rack. I think VCV Rack is more for making ideas come true. I think, I don't know. I mean, again, VCV Rack is an emulation of eurorack, so you can work with it more or less the same. But in VCV Rack, it's really a new instrument all the time. Yeah, so again, practicing, dedicate time for practicing, go through the manuals. Manuals, they are so important, they are so fun. Manuals, you know, read the fun manual. Read the fun manual. This is why the F is there, not for something else. Read the fun manual. Yeah, and buy something new, that always helps. Okay, the next question is from Thomas Mundelir. I'm wondering why we rarely see compressors and limiters in modular patches. Hey, okay, that's a nice one. So limiters, I think limiters, first of all, I mean, they can be used also creatively, but limiters are saved mostly for the mastering process, I guess. So there is no really need for limiters in modular, unless you want to have like a brick wall limiter to keep your monitors and your headphones and your ears safe. But I think limiters are more for the mastering process. So there is no really real need for them. Compressors, actually compressors you see quite a lot. A lot of people are using compressors with side chaining, for example, for compressing drums in the modular. In VCV Rack, by the way, there are a few new compressors added lately. But I think in hardware, to me, for example, I mean, I don't use a lot of drums or stuff like this, but to me, if I have to choose between something like the Mimeophone or the Morphogen and a compressor, I will always go with something like the Morphogen or the Mimeophone or something a bit like this, rather than a compressor. There is money involved, there is space involved, there is power involved. Not a lot of people want to make this, to dedicate their space and the money and the power for a compressor. Although again, also with a compressor, there are a lot of creative things you can do. This is at least my view, but you do see compressors in eurorack, mostly for side chaining, I guess. Yeah. So a quick intermezzo before we continue with the other questions. I did this talk the other day with Sign Mountain and Monosyn for the Colorado Modular Synth Society. It was really fun. And I spoke there about that I used to make Psy Trance when I was younger. When I started out with electronic music, a few people were interested to listen to how it sounds like. I still have a few of the tracks saved on my hard drive. So this, I will play something that I made, I think it was 2005, 2006, something like this, 15 years ago, Psy Trance. So I'm going to play a short clip and then we can continue with the questions. Okay, the next question is from Giovanni Raciti. What are the choices you follow to recommend when building a hybrid system, or better, mistakes to avoid? Do you just choose for hardware the modules you love most, or those non-DSP that sound different on hardware? Do you tend to build something that could live standalone in hardware and minimize back and forth with VCV to manage latency at best, or do you rely on only one of the two walls for specific tasks of that job, CV, master clock, etc.? Okay, really nice question. Let's start with a hybrid system, something that you should realize before you start building a hybrid system. And I'm going to say it again and again from now on, because there are a lot of people writing me that they have issues and there is no real solution for this. If you want to build a hybrid system, you will have to deal with latency, which can be really a bummer, a downer, a party pooper, a buzz killer, whatever you want to call it. There will be always latency. By the way, also when you have like an e-guitar, electric guitar, and you plug it to record, also there you will have latency. Always when you send one signal from one system to another system, there will always be latency with MIDI controllers, with a hybrid eurorack, VCV rack, with guitars. There will always be latency. Some software like Ableton, for example, also Reaper, by the way, they have a built-in sort of a fix for latency that they just calculate it with using the clock from your interface or something like this, and they calculate the latency and they fix it for you, but there is still latency. So before you go hybrid, make sure you are willing to deal with latency, because this is something that can ruin the experience. Okay, so this is first. Now, how do I choose the modules? This is a really good question, because I think hardware, what I love most about hardware is the tweaking, the hands-on control, playing the instrument. Now I know also with VCV Rack, with VCV Rack you can play the instrument, you can have a MIDI controller. I have the Midilar, which is amazing for VCV Rack. But with MIDI it's much more intentional, which means that you have to think what you want to map, and you have to remember exactly what it is. With the Midilar controller, it's easier because it already looks modular. So you can have different MIDI modules and use them for different tasks. But still, you have to make the decision what you want to control. With hardware, everything is there. If during a performance, if during a recording, all of a sudden I think, wow, now I have to change the delay time or something like this, I can just go and make it. I don't have to think, okay, now I have to stop and I have to map the delay time. And now, so this is a bit different. Hardware, it's there, it's always there for me. Which means that the modules I will use, the modules I will choose to have in hardware are modules that I'm most likely to play with. Most likely to tweak because it's there for me to play. Filters, all sorts of effects. You know, a lot of people ask me why you have reverb in your system and you can just add in VCV or in Reaper or whatnot. Because I like to tweak it during the performance. I like to play with it. It's different when it's right there in front of me. It's different. So this is the first thing I will consider. Is the module playable? Can I play with the module? Or is just something like, for example, there's a module that I have that I don't use a lot, which is that, and I bought it with my own money, and this is the Disting. Now, the Disting is great. It's an amazing module. Everyone should have a Disting. But it's not really for me because it's not really playable. It's something that I connect and forget about it. But I'm still trying to use it because it can do so many things. But for example, something like this I would not get next time. If I would start all over again, this is not something I would get. So the first thing I consider is the module playable? Then this relates to the next part. Do you tend to build something that could live standalone in hardware? So something that I noticed, not when I make music. When I make music, that's okay. But when I practice, when I sit down to experiment, it's hard for me to switch between both worlds at the same time. To start something in the modular, in the hardware, and do it in VCV and continue with the hardware. It's difficult for me to move between the different worlds because I try to shut down, I try not to think so much, and I try to concentrate on what's in front of me. And when you have the box of the modular, the hardware, the box in front of you, it's like a whole universe and it's there for me. And it's hard for me to get up and switch to the laptop or to the computer or whatnot. So I tend to get modules also in hardware that I know that also when I use the hardware without VCV Rack, I can still use it. I will still have modulation. I will still have enough voices. I will still have sequences. So I try to build also a system that can work standalone, totally. So I think about playability and I think about, will it help me to have also a standalone unit where when I practice, when I experiment, when I'm learning a module and I can just concentrate on this little box. It's not so little anymore, but I can just concentrate in this universe without switching too much. So this is also something I think about. The next one, do you rely on only one of the two worlds for specific tasks? So no, again, I don't have the clock only from VCV Rack, or I don't have CV coming only from VCV Rack. When I make music with VCV Rack and the hardware, so then totally I send signals freely back and forth. But when I practice, if for example, also when I just use VCV Rack, when I practice with VCV Rack, which I do a lot, I build a lot of patches, I practice a lot, I experiment a lot. It's hard for me to use VCV Rack. I'm locked. I have this hoodie so that keeps me looking forward to the screen. I'm locked on VCV Rack and it's hard for me to turn around and do something with hardware and to concentrate there also. It's just too much to comprehend at once. So when I use just VCV Rack, I use only VCV Rack. When I experiment, when I'm practicing, when I'm learning the tools. Yeah, so that's it. Or what was else? Do you rely on one of the two worlds? So no, I don't rely. It's always something different. It's always, sometimes I will have a clock, depends on the patch, depends on what I'm trying to do. Sometimes I will have a clock from the hardware, sometimes I will have a clock from the VCV, sometimes I will not have a clock at all. Depends on the patch. So again, playability, if I can use it also standalone, because I like to concentrate on one thing when I'm practicing, and I don't rely on something specific from one or the other world. So the next question is from Steven Benedict. Could you maybe talk a bit about working with samples? I think I am missing some core concepts. Like how do you make them sound in tune, work with what you are composing? For example, if you are using piano samples from felt instruments, or that someone gave you, do you use samples that were made to a specific key? Do the samples you want to use sometimes dictate the key you will compose in? In one way, is one way just to use samples that are more ambient, like in your Arbor demo, and not specific to any key, so they work in any composition? Are a bunch of short samples easier to work with than a long sample? Also, do you have tips on how to make samples work rhythmically with the composition? I find if I change a sample to work in pitch, it might not fit rhythmically anymore, or if I change its speed to work with a certain rhythm, now the pitch is not good, and that sort of thing. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your question, Stephen. Working with samples. So since I have Morphogene, and since I dug deeper into Simpliciter and VCV Rack, I'm using a lot of samples. I'm using lots of samples. Usually it's stuff that I sample specifically for what I'm working with. So I will, for example, if I'm working now on a piece of music, I will start by sampling, by making myself a sort of a palette of sounds I want to work with. I fell in love with, again, I used to work with samples before, but now I fell in love again, working with samples, with the Morphogene, with Arbor, with the Mimeophone, with stuff like this, and with Simpliciter also in VCV Rack, with the Sussudio also in VCV Rack from Nischi, such a nice sampler. So usually what I will do, I will start by preparing samples for myself. If I have samples, this I also do. I have a bit of samples that I collected also from other people, like Jogging House. He released a sample pack a while ago. And what he did was he wrote exactly the note that the samples are in, or if I'm not mistaken, I think everything was just in C. I'm not so sure, but never mind. Still, I knew which notes the sample are, so I could fit them. Now, if I have a sample that will not fit, usually, or I will not use it, or I will load it in something like Contact, for example, which is a brilliant instrument for working with samples for hardware, because you can just play the sample, and there is also a sort of a granular mode that you can change the pitch without changing the time. So you can pitch shift without time stretching, which is also quite useful. And there's also the other way around, I think, that you can time stretch without changing the pitch. So Contact, there's also a free edition of Contact. You can just load the sample there and then play it in different registers or different rhythms. If you want, by the way, to get a rhythm from a sample, for example, if you have a drum beat or some sort of a sample that sounds rhythmic to you, but you are not so sure which tempo it's in, you can use the end of cycle output with a clock multiplier and then get a clock from there, because you will get a sort of a rhythmic clock that you can multiply or divide if you want, depends on the sample, and use this clock sort of a sync to the sample, which is also cool. What else? Sometimes dictate the key. Sometimes I will start, sometimes, I don't know, do I start like this? If I have, for example, I'm trying to think, if I have a sample that's in a specific key, maybe, why not? Maybe, again, I'm thinking when I start making music, first of all, what I like to do is I like to prepare the instruments I have. To choose the instruments, of course, this changes all the time. I never end up like I started or like what I had in mind, but it gives me comfort to choose the instruments I want to work with, to have some sort of limitation, which means also samples. I will choose the samples I want to work with. For example, the last collaboration I did was with Michael Lyko, the guy who connects the mushrooms into his system, into the eurorack, his eurorack, and he sent me a few samples. So first of all, we said, okay, let's make this in F minor. So the samples, I sent him a sample of my flute, which was in F minor. He sent me something back, again F minor, and he sent me also a drum beat, and he told me exactly this was 70 BPM. So I knew that that's my limitation. I will work in 70 BPM because I want it to be in sync with the drums. So this is what I did. So sometimes when I have samples that I want to work with, I will check, okay, what BPM is this? I will try not to change things so much, especially with samples, I think. I mean, if I change, it will be just by octaves, for example, because then it will stay, half time, quarter time, and stuff like this. I'm just trying to think what I do, for example, with drum beats, because I'm not using so many drum samples. Maybe the end of cycle is a good idea, and try not to use samples that you have to change so much later on, or try to collect, first of all, before you go and make music, try to collect samples that can work together and limit yourself to a number of samples. If I'm using piano samples from felt instruments, I record them myself so I can adjust them exactly to what I need. If I receive something from someone else, or I use something from someone else, I will make sure it's in the same key. I will make sure the same note. I will make sure it fits. That's also something, that's also a part of the craft, let's say, the sound starts from the tools you choose to use, or from the sounds themselves, the raw sounds. If you use something that doesn't fit and you try to make it fit, maybe sometimes you can get like happy accidents and it will work beautifully, but sometimes it will just be frustrating. So you have to make this balance and how you want to work with it. So I think choosing the sounds from the beginning is a big part of the craft of making music or electronic music with samplers. Ambient samples. Also, ambient can be a lot of in key and rhythmic and stuff like this. But if you mean something more abstract, then this you can use as you wish. I don't tend to use so many of those, although I do use a bit of the sample pack I prepared. The more abstract sounding, the more the bubble stuff. I like the bubble stuff. And those I add later on when I think, you know what, I want something here, then I go and I choose something, because I know I don't have to fit them so much rhythmically or to a key or something like this. If I change sample to work, it might not fit rhythmically or the pitch. So again, try using Contact. Contact is great, or a different granular sampler. I'm not so sure what else is out there. You can also use I think you have Morphogene, Steven, right? I'm pretty sure I saw a Morphogene in your case. You can use the Morphogene also to do this. If you connect a clock to the Morphogene and you set the gene size, you can create time stretch without pitch shifting, which is also quite cool. So yeah, choose your tools, I think, before you start making music, so you have some sort of limitation, some sort of starting point, and work from there. Okay, the next question is from Dirk. And now for something different. How to transpose different sequences for different VCOs, I guess, at the same time. Simple example, a 2-5-1 in a circle of fifths, sequenced with different sequencers and rhythms with respective 1 volt per octave to a few VCOs. Can this be done also with hardware? So first of all, in VCV Rack, it's really easy, because you can add as many modules as you want, or as many modules as the CPU allows you. So if you have different sequences going to different VCOs, first of all, many quantizers like Quantum in VCV Rack have built-in transpose input, so you can use this. But if you have different sequencers and you send it to different VCOs, all you have to do is send them through a sort of a mixer, a unity mixer, a CV mixer. In VCV Rack, you don't have voltage dropouts, so it's really easy. You just connect them through the mixer and you have some sort of a constant voltage coming. If it's if you use constants from ML, for example, it's set by semitones. If you use 12 key from impromptu, you have a whole keyboard that you can transpose with, and you just mix it with the sequence, unless you're using a quantizer that has a built-in transpose input. So in VCV, it's not really an issue. You have to mix the constant voltage, the voltage you want to transpose in. For example, voltage equals to 7 semitones if you want to transpose by a perfect fifth, for example. And you mix it with the sequence, with the different sequences, different mixers, and you use some sort of a macro controller that you also have to use in hardware. We'll see in a second how we can do this. Some sort of macro controller, if it's your keyboard, if it's the mouse with the button, and you can transpose. Or again, if you are using a 12 key from impromptu, you can just transpose using 12 key. Now in hardware, it's a bit more complicated because again, you cannot just add modules. You will need something like precision adders. In VCV Rack, if you are mixing CV or whatever, never mind if it's a volt per octave, never mind what it is, you will not get dropouts in voltage. If you are adding 1 volt, if you are mixing 1 volt with another volt in VCV, you will get 2 volts. In hardware, it can be a bit lower because there are voltage dropouts. So you will need to use something like precision adders that will add precisely the voltage you want. So for example, if you have a sequencer that you want to transpose, and you have, for example, a keyboard that you want to raise it by, again, 7 semitones, you have to send the sequencer to a precision adder and the keyboard to a precision adder, and from there to the VCO, and then you can transpose it precisely, of course. Don't forget that also oscillators in hardware might not track so well, so there might be also a bit of a detuning there. Transposing rhythms, I'm not so sure if I understand different sequencers and rhythms. I guess you mean different sequence rhythms and not drums or something like this with 1 volt per octave. So yeah, in hardware you will have to use precision adders, unless the sequencer you're using has a built-in transpose function. For example, if you're using something like the KeyStep or the KeyStep Pro or the BeatStep Pro, they all, I believe, have transpose functions that you can just use them built in, and then you don't have to worry about precision adders or anything like that. And what else? In VCV Rack, again, it's much less complicated because you can use as many modules as you want, and you can just build your own transposition machine, transposition section, which is quite cool. Okay, so this was the last question. Let's move on again to the submissions for the Patreon Discord challenge. Again, sending all of your voices through 100% wet reverb. Thank you for watching. Patreons, thank you so much for your support. I hope it was okay like this without only my hands, but also my face. Okay, thanks again. Ciao. Cheers.